I actually have a favourite banker who is called Trude, and we have a wonderful time when I go banking. Well, good afternoon to everyone, and as I have already made comment, I think, to Heather herself, I'd like to take you to a small scenario. We would like you, said Heather, to talk about why animal welfare matters to you and how attitudes to animals are shaped by early experiences in education. Oh, it's so easy to say yes to Heather. Well, who's going to say no? And then stark reality. I realised that I had committed to a task that will be about a very personal journey, and this to an audience whose combined expertise, as others have commented, about animal welfare presupposes there is nothing that I can say that you haven't heard before. And I think that includes the video I'm going to show this afternoon. So I am overwhelmed. This is the first time I have been offered the opportunity to explain my commitment to animal welfare in a public forum, and I find it a very daunting experience. I'm not a scientist, as I wrote in the abstract, which actually told me that I had to give a paper. I am not a scientist of either the clinical or social variety. I'm simply somebody who has been deeply involved in education and who is passionate about protecting those who cannot speak for themselves, children and animals. The following comments I offer, therefore, present an idiosyncratic perspective of the ways in which pedagogy and philanthropy have influenced my personal approach to animal welfare and how animal welfare continues to shape my existence. The greatness of a nation and its moral progress, said Mahatma Gandhi, can be judged by the way its animals are treated. Is there a more inspirational and compelling observation than this for educators to bring animal welfare as a central component of the learning experience in every educational institution across Australia? Far-fetched? Why? How better could we focus on such ethical precepts as compassion and kindness, understanding and unselfishness, than through an enlightened curriculum which encompasses our treatment of the creatures with whom we share this planet? As a teacher of English, the principal of a girls' school, and the proprietor of a CBD nursery and preschool, I believe that animal welfare issues should take a much higher profile across the educational program. Early in my career, I discovered that it was possible and necessary to encourage discussions of man's inhumanity to animals, because literature classics abound with graphic and brutal images. From Jack London's Call of the Wild to Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, or L'Étranger by Albert Camus, my students were confronted by cruelty to animals with which most of them were entirely unfamiliar. Their distress often prompted debates about positive ways to use moral outrage as a weapon and how violations of humanitarian expectations could and should be confronted in their own community. This was values education at its best and most accessible. Students can and do demonstrate a high degree of emotional intelligence, and many are committed to find justice for the vulnerable and the innocent. I recall a particularly well-organised group of girls who decided to protest against a circus which featured elephants and other animals to live performances. Their petition, entitled "To Prohibit the Use of Animals in Circuses," note that, not ban the circus as such, these women were very savvy, produced widespread publicity and poor notoriety for the circus concerned. The classroom is a potentially powerful forum for practical ethics, which today is extended out into an even greater and instant reach through the social media platforms, the preferred form of communication for youth. But that is now and yet to be fully explored and exploited as an educational tool. In the 80s and 90s, to which I'm referring, such technology did not exist when newspapers, radio, and television were still regarded as the source of mass social outrage. And schools were only beginning to realise the importance of engaging with the wider community. Lively, informed speakers were taking the place of formatted traditional daily assemblies. Students were taking part in choosing who and what they wanted to hear and see. In such a climate of change, I became the principal of a girls' school, and it's safe to assume that animal welfare soon received a high profile across the curriculum. Progress was very slow, but inexorable. And as the culture changed to accommodate this moral imperative, so members of the school community, from girls to staff to parents, even old girls, reached a level of acceptance that exceeded my expectations. We even appointed a patron of animal welfare. This extract from her final article for the school magazine, best summarises what can be achieved. Said Claire, "For a number of years I have been associated with a school which values compassionate education. It is full of caring staff and students who together do all they can to support animal welfare. I visit the school often to talk about various animal welfare issues, including the domestic animal tragedies, overseas atrocities like bullfighting, bear bile farming, and many of other related subjects. I have given hundreds of school talks in my life, but never have I encountered such an attentive and concerned group as these girls. They are thirsty for knowledge and eager to do anything that will help to reduce animal suffering in the world. This school also believes in the hands-on principle, and apart from me arriving with a tribe of animals, including bottle-fed baby wombats, possums and koalas, the school has been responsible for many adoptions of cats and dogs from various animal shelters. My trips are less frequent due to the distance I now live from the school, but even if my association ceases, I know that the girls will carry on the work of animal welfare and future animals will be in good hands when they go out into the community. If only all schools in the community at large could be like this one, the world would be a better place." About halfway through my 15-year tenure as principal, when the school's enrolment was buoyant, an ambitious capital works program was underway, and the ubiquitous Year 12 academic results were impressive. I was informed by one of my former board members that as CEO I should not have a dog at the school. "It affects standards," he said. "You would never see the chief executive of a major oil company with a dog in the office." There were several or a number of rejoinders I could have made, but I think what a pity is what I said. But it is a sentiment that would be echoed, I suspect, by 3 or 4 of my brightest and best, who are now admired achievers in their chosen professions and taking on leading roles in animal welfare organisations in Melbourne. We can assume that many children who live in our cities, of course, are now denied the sort of childhood probably you had, or hopefully a lot of you had, and I was certainly fortunate enough to have in the suburban Melbourne. Dogs, cats, guinea pigs, rabbits were part of our daily life. My parents were enlightened mentors for my siblings and me, teaching us to be caring and responsible towards the pets who shared our lives. Unfortunately, CBD living today in apartment-style accommodation in Melbourne precludes the presence of an animal, and thus the children have few opportunities to experience a home environment in which they interact with pets. The importance of providing activities in the childcare setting, which exposes very young children to animals, is therefore paramount, in my opinion, and the contribution to their happiness is immeasurable. So how did I become familiar with these things? The opportunity presented itself when my husband and I became the proprietors of Kids on Collins, one of the largest nursery and preschool centres in Victoria. With nearly 200 children, sounds like a nightmare for some of you, doesn't it? Aged from 6 months to 5 years of age, enrolled every day, it was possible to introduce all sorts of enlightenment. Our catering staff, for example, prepared 5 meals from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Thus, the means for play for play-based activities relating to the origin of food could be flourishing on site. Dozens of books about animals with wonderful illustrations were available in every room and read to the children at regular intervals. Think Hairy McCleary, Charlotte's Web, Possum Magic, Wombat Stew. Art and craft projects, themed room decoration, and a myriad of other activities with an animal bias were always happening. A variety of exposures to living animals was considered to be paramount, including the regular presence of dogs belonging to staff members, and I rarely encountered an early learning educator who did not make the connection between children and animals as they arrived each morning. Special visits by representatives from animal welfare organisations were sometimes a highlight and mostly questionable. Naturally, I encountered a few instances of resistance from parents. Hygiene and safety were always cited as the usual reason for concern, and this would have to be talked through and satisfactorily addressed. Well, in most cases, helicopter parents accepted. In 2013, Jane Bone published a challenging article entitled "The Animal as the Fourth Educator," a literature review of animals and young children in pedagogical relationships. Bone represented the case for acknowledging the animal in early childhood settings. It is an idea which is an expansion of Loris Malaguzzi's concept that the environment, which is the third educator, along with the first two being the team of two teachers, is part of the Italian preschool Reggio Emilia concept and theories that many of you would know. Her thesis is both exciting and affirming for all of us who believe that animal welfare issues can be a positive factor in a comprehensive curriculum. Earlier this year, I had the wonderful experience of observing the CARE, C-A-R-E, Creating Animal Respect and Empathy program devised by the remarkable Sally Meakin, who is the Manager of Education and Learning Service at RSPCA Victoria and present. It is in a recent paper entitled Changing Lives, Community-Based Animal Welfare Education in Melbourne, Australia. Sally explains that her program targets new arrivals in Australia with first languages other than English, and especially students from a refugee or asylum seeker background. She goes on to comment that since the program began amongst a small number of English language schools in Melbourne, there has been significant anecdotal evidence of its capacity to improve attitudes and behaviours towards animals and to increase empathy, and that there are benefits for student wellness and their psychosocial development. Two social scientists are now working in collaboration with RSPCA Education Victoria, and as their preliminary results have been received on the human-animal bond data, these show very positive changes which have been consistent across age, gender, and country of origin. As a principal, I've always found that the best way to impart accurate and meaningful commentary to parents on aspects of the school's educational program is to assign the senior leaders the task of writing about that in official magazines and speaking to on the school's annual speech night. Their words and manner of presentation had far greater impact than mine, particularly for their peers. I was reminded of this in my most recent role as a mentor for the Victorian Young Australian of the Year, Thomas King. 18 years of age, his CV would be impressive for an 81-year-old, and he is currently working for Animals Australia under the aegis of director Lynn White as an advocate. His particular focus is on the 17 to 27-year-old age group. It is this cohort, Lynn White and I believe, that is going to be the key to create long-term change in all animal industries. During the past 2 weeks, I have accompanied Thomas to various schools where he has spoken to hundreds of students ranging from Year 10 to Year 12. His presentation is impressive and includes this short video made last year by Animals Australia, and created at a time when it would have been easy to despair about global events. But it provides an important reminder that acts of kindness and compassion towards our fellow species reflect the finest values of humanity. You may have seen it, but I think that it's worth seeing again. Thank you, Peter.
He's looking pretty bewildered. He's quick getting a drink. Oh yeah. Yeah.
It is an amazing film because the combination of those images and Thomas King have had a remarkable impact, I should say, on the students he's already addressed. I've had staff members weeping, I've had students coming up and saying, what can we do? How can we follow this on so that we can start to live like you're suggesting all of this? It leaves, I think, he always leaves the students with the wonderful challenge that that Emma Watson made. He accompanied Emma to the United Nations Assembly last year, and you may remember Emma, who said, Ask yourself, if it's not me, who? If not now, when? Well, the title of my remarks this afternoon refers to the art of teaching and the art of giving, pedagogy and philanthropy. Are they related? Well, for me, they're now inseparable. Of course, all of our lives, I guess every one of our lives, I should say, is a psychological whodunit. You may notice in the notes that I'm endeavouring to write my first crime novel, and it's important you know that. Because just as crime writers tease out the factors which reveal means, motive and opportunity, so, given my current literary pursuit, I will borrow from this genre to explain. The arrival of the millennium set my husband Brian and I along a path less travelled. He had retired some years before as the managing director of a printing company and was a very skilled accountant and auditor. I had decided that 15 years was quite long enough for any school to withstand Prue Gillies, and I had resigned at the end of 1999. This was a watershed period in our lives during which we made a conscious decision to consider our values, review our lifestyle, strategically assess our income, and plan to ensure that half of our after-tax profits be donated to organisations whose work we admired and wished to financially support. The opportunity to purchase Kids on Collins gave us the means to combine our skills and experience to create an enriched learning environment for young children and to give financial support to organisations which we believe to be effectively engaged in improving the lives of animals, both here and in Australia, and in various international settings. It was a calculated risk, but necessary if we were to achieve our desired objectives. After 5 years of consistent growth, we reached the goal, the motive we'd set for ourselves, and could set about implementing the next stage of our plan. Once having got there, we discovered that there was an even greater sense of satisfaction and happiness than anything we had envisaged at the outset. My husband died 2 years ago, but I continue to honour that decision regarding how I apply myself and my income to this particular undertaking. I value the feeling of being part of the work with several organisations I respect and I've chosen to report. And if vindication was needed, some weeks ago I encountered the most recent book by internationally renowned philosopher Professor Peter Singer, and you've already mentioned him, John, entitled The Most Good You Can Do. This book has arrived at a time when we have become aware of the staggering amounts now being donated to charity by some of the world's richest Americans, Warren Buffett, Bill and Melinda Gates, and Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. The latest is Apple boss Tom Cook, who is planning to donate his estimated $1 billion fortune to charity, commenting that he has started donating money to unspecified causes and is trying to develop a more systematic approach to philanthropy that goes beyond writing cheques. Obviously, for most of us, these sorts of wealth resources are so vast we can't comprehend them. But the actions of billionaires are part of what Singer has identified as effective altruism, the name for a new movement of those in search of an ethical life. According to Singer, student organisations are forming around it, and there are lively discussions on social media pages and websites, as well as in the pages of the New York Times and Washington Post. Effective altruism is based on a very simple idea. We should do the most good we can. And to paraphrase Singer further, this movement is making a difference in the world, providing a way of giving meaning to our own lives and gaining fulfilment in what we do. It appears to be attracting the coming generation, and that gives real grounds for optimism about the future. Yes, you think, the plot has come to a satisfactory conclusion, and the means, motive, and opportunity are explained. Sadly, not so. The search to find effective charities, and this quest has included welfare related to children and health, is an arduous one. I have been inspired by a few, been in awe of others, and totally devastated by the sheer incompetence of too many. I have served on several boards and been involved in organisations, involved in organising major events. I have visited operational headquarters, shelters and sanctuaries both here and overseas. And any wisdom I have acquired about animal welfare has been through my engagement with some very special individuals who are dedicated to the cause of reducing the suffering of animals. I would urge those CEOs amongst you who are responsible for fundraising, marketing and communication departments in your organisations to ensure their messages carry the essence of your mission statement. Of course, you must ensure they focus on policy and practice, but it is how well the organisation is being managed and how it is performing that will be held to account. Cute pictures which tug at the heartstrings may attract an ephemeral following, but are they enough to persuade the effective altruist to commit to long-term support and financial gifts? As Singer has pointed out, the millennials, those 17 to 27-year-olds, those who came of age after the year 2000, are very practical ethicists. They give where there is evidence that the organisation is doing the most good with its source of charitable giving. And how do you go about reinforcing your associations with the donors who are critical to your long-term success? Highly remunerated marketing experts are too often locked into recycled and frankly redundant tactics to elicit and maintain financial support. It has been my experience that the relationship which should exist between donor, who has decided to commit to the organisation, and those who are responsible for this delicate connection too often mishandle, misunderstand, and sometimes destroy it. What happened to personalised acknowledgements? These do not have to be posted. A telephone call is usually somewhere available. In fact, the more immediate, the better. Most donors, including those over 40 years of age, do use social media platforms to communicate. They do connect through emails, texts, Facebooks and Twitter. They do possess iPhones, laptops, iPads, tablets, blah, blah, blah. They do not rely on snail mail, which still seems to be the preferred, if outdated, model for the professional fundraisers. How much does it cost in stamps for a newsletter which can appear online? I know from the corner of my eye that Bidder is on her feet, and so I will forego talking about my third category of people who I think perhaps you can talk about tomorrow, folk who are involved directly in organisations, how you handle volunteers. And I'd like to leave one comment about that. Find out who they are. I found myself with a group of people one of whom was a retired judge stuffing envelopes full of archive material. I think it's a very good idea to find out who your supporters are. Finally, this is an era where leadership and charitable ends, and sorry, I'll start that again. Bidder's worried me. This is an era where leadership of charitable and not-for-profit is under ever-increasing scrutiny. Whether an organisation is successful is reflected in its culture. It is revealed by the behaviour and commitment of the staff and the opinions and attitudes expressed by the wider community, detractors and supporters alike. Little wonder that many of us connect more effectively to social media platforms. Why did one rescue group in Victoria manage to marshal over 100,000 supporters on Facebook and Twitter in a matter of hours earlier this year? The answer is that reaching out and engaging large numbers of people in a social issue has never been so easy. This is the new reality for animal welfare. Why so much concentration on bequests? Why, I should have said. Why so much concentration on bequests when it is quite possible to kickstart the living? Thank you.